Welcome to the Gospel for Men podcast. I'm your host, Mark Winton, Associate Pastor of Men's Ministry here at GPCA in Lawrence, Kansas. And the simple purpose of this podcast is to encourage you and to equip you in the gospel so you can glorify and enjoy Jesus in this generation. Brothers, this quick and simple podcast is really just to give you a quick introduction to our 2026 theme for our men's gatherings this year, which is Act Like Men. Now, if you've seen the bulletin announcement, you're probably wondering about the graphic. Hey, listen, Grace does not pay me according to my abilities to do graphic design. So we use this platform called Canva. It has this AI component. I said, hey, give me a men's ministry graphic. And so what popped up and why I loved it is because if you notice on the graphic, it's a group of men. This isn't something we just do by ourselves. It's a group of men walking from darkness into light, and they just happen to be hiking. And we have our Colorado hiking trip this year. So I was like, good enough for me. Men needing each other's encouragement and accountability to walk out of darkness and walk into light. And that really brings up our theme for this year, which is Act Like Men, which comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 13 through 14, where the Apostle Paul writes, "Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love." Now, I'll do more of a deep dive on this verse at our first breakfast, which will be February 28th. But if you know anything about the book of Corinthians, right, there is so much drama going on. There's a lot of drama because of poor doctrine. There's a lot of drama going on because of poor conduct. In fact, poor doctrine usually leads to poor conduct. And what the Apostle Paul, one of his closing exhortations is to men. And he tells them, act like men, because men are on the front line of the church being the church. And I think this is a critical verse for us because what we'll see in this exhortation is, yes, there are attributes of strength, but there are also attributes of service as well. One of the common refrains that I try and tell my own sons is, boys, you got to know when to be tough and when to be tender. Because in life, as men, both will be required of us. And it takes wisdom to know which is needed when. And it takes the ministry of the Holy Spirit and the example of Jesus, the ministry of Jesus towards us for our behalf, to both be tough and to be tender. Now, we've also added these subtopics that will guide us throughout the year: shepherd, build, and lead, because we think that these are biblical roles and biblical activities that God has both assigned and equipped men for. And so to unpack these roles and these activities, we're going to have a time of teaching, but we'll also have a time of testimony from men in our own congregation. And one of the things that I love about being a men's minister here at GPCA is we've got really the big three generations covered. We've got young men, middle-aged men, and old men. Good representation across all of those demographics. And so we'll have a time of testimony in each of those categories from men from each of those generation. Now, why did the men's ministry team want this for our theme this year? Well, one thing, we know that our theme for last year, Forerunner, maybe that was more abstract. So we thought we'd do something a little bit more concrete. But we also thought that this was timely because of all of the cultural angst that's going on in our world today. We'll discuss more of this on our breakfast on the 28th, but I'm definitely saddened, maybe not surprised, not shocked that our culture is confused about what men should be about. If you go back to the 80s and 90s, at least the church movement was kind of promise keepers. I'm not disparaging promise keepers, but that movement kind of came out of a cultural trend called hold on, I got to look at my notes here. The mythopoetic men's movement. And if you know anything about that men's movement, that was kind of in response to the feminization of the women's movement in the 60s and 70s. And they thought, oh my gosh, we're losing ground. We got to do something about this. And so that mythopoetic men's movement had things like the modern male initiation, through things like the Mankind Project. And they do these things called the New Warrior Training Adventure Push. And again, all of that was to combat the feminization that was happening in the 60s and 70s. But then we fast forward to our generation in the 2015 to 2025. Now we have these terms such as toxic masculinity flooding the airwaves. And even the American Psychological Association is getting on board with it. They would say that they've done like 40 years of research in order to rescue men from traditional masculinity, which is psychologically harmful and potentially inwardly and outwardly dangerous. And so again, as the culture swings back and forth, we have to deal with the effects of that, but we dare not let those things define what it means to be men. So we thought it would be wise to frame the conversation this year in terms of what does biblical masculinity look like? And as you guys probably know, we're not the only Christians. We're not the only church to be doing this. In fact, about a year ago, some men from our church, we actually went through this book, which I would highly commend to you, The Masculine Mandate, God's Calling to Men, which is written by Richard Phillips. He's actually a former Army officer, a PCA pastor in South Carolina. In the broader evangelical church, you've got Joby Martin. He recently did a big podcast, Big Men's Roundtable. Matt Chandler and a bunch of other big names were on that. They're actually doing a conference. I think they're calling it 1613 from 1 Corinthians 16:13. He's written a book, Joby Martin has, called Stand Firm and Act Like Men. And all of these are attempts for us to rediscover biblical manhood and the importance of biblical manhood for the good of our church, the good of our families, and even the good of our communities. But I would even say that biblical manhood is deeper than that because it's what helps us glorify and enjoy Jesus in this generation. So this year we've got a few different events. The first one will be a men's breakfast on February 28th from 8 to 9:30. And we're really going to tee up those verses, act like men, be strong, stand firm in the faith, do everything in love. And we'll have a time of fellowship and a time of eating and then table discussion afterwards. On the 1st of May, we'll have the John Harvat Memorial Fish Fry, and there we'll tee up this idea of shepherding. On the 22nd of August, we will have another men's breakfast, and we'll tee up this idea that men are called to build. And then on the 3rd of December, that will be an evening event. We wanted to do 2 in the morning, 2 in the evening to try and give all of those generations of dads the most options to come and avail themselves of this. And we'll hit that last one of lead. Also this year, the 10th through the 13th of September, we'll do our annual men's hiking trip to Colorado. So be on the lookout for that sign up. And then what we're hoping to do, again, because we have such a great representation of men from all ages, is to offer a father-son bonding event in the spring and a father-son bonding event in the fall. And we'll have more information coming about that, maybe even at the men's breakfast on the 28th of February. So hope you'll avail yourselves of these opportunities, again, to be encouraged, to be equipped, to be challenged in this idea of biblical masculinity, that we would be men not just informed by the gospel, but formed by the gospel, that we might glorify and enjoy Jesus well, even in this generation. Thanks for tuning in. Lord bless and keep you. Hope to see you on the 28th of February for breakfast.